Imagine this. You are standing knee-deep in freezing black water. The bog around you is silent, save for the wet, sucking sound of mud shifting beneath your boots. A cold mist curls low, clinging to the peak as if it wishes to bury its secrets. Forever. In your hand, a flashlight trembles slightly, the beam cutting across a surface that isn't stone, isn't root, but fabric thin. Frayed nylon stretched tight, its color muted by years underground. A tent, submerged. The smell that rises is unmistakable, the sickly sweet metallic tang of decomposition lingering even after 6 long years. And inside shapes, slumped and sunken, impossibly preserved in the bog's oxygen-starved depths. The silence in that moment is unbearable, because in that drowned tent lies not only a family, but the return of a story Scotland thought it had buried. This is the case of the MacLeod family, a disappearance that haunted the Highlands for 6 years, and whose rediscovery remains one of the darkest chapters in Scotland's modern history. The MacLeods were, by all outward appearances, ordinary. David MacLeod, 42, a civil engineer from Inverness. Practical, stoic, known for his dry wit and his stubborn streak. A man who preferred the quiet company of landscapes to boardrooms. Anna MacLeod, 39, his wife, a schoolteacher. Compassionate, articulate, with an almost obsessive love for literature. Students remembered her as the kind of teacher who read aloud, as if every word was a spell. Ewan, 12, and Isla, 9, their children. Ewan was fascinated by geology. He carried a field journal, sketching rocks, soil layers, fossils. Isla was whimsical, endlessly curious, with a habit of braiding wildflowers into crowns. To their friends, the MacLeods embodied something quietly enviable, a family bound together by love, curiosity, and a reverence for the outdoors. Every year they chose a summer expedition, sometimes a caravan by the coast, sometimes a cottage near Loch Ness. But in the summer of 2014, they set their eyes further north, deeper into the Highlands. They wanted remoteness, silence, something primal. It was July 11th, 2014, a Friday evening when the MacLeods' blue Ford Estate car was last seen heading north on the A9, passing Aviemore. CCTV captured them stopping briefly at a petrol station, David filling the tank while Anna bought snacks inside. The children can be seen on the footage through the car's rear window laughing, poking at each other in the backseat. The timestamp reads 1943. The weather was fair then, sun dipping low but skies clear. They carried with them a small tent, rucksacks, food supplies, a Tranja stove, and maps folded neatly inside a waterproof pouch. Their plan, as told to Anna's sister, was to spend the weekend hiking and wild camping near Loch Glass, but the MacLeods never came back. By Monday morning, Anna failed to appear for work at the primary school. Her colleagues assumed illness. By that afternoon, after calls went unanswered, her sister reported the family missing. Police Scotland issued a concern for welfare bulletin, noting their vehicle description and probable route. At first, optimism reigned. The Highlands were vast, phone signals patchy. Perhaps the family had simply extended their trip. But by Tuesday evening, when no signs surfaced, optimism soured into dread. The Highlands are as breathtaking as they are merciless. Rugged hills roll into bogs that swallow without warning. Weather shifts in minutes, clear skies turning to choking fog or battering rain. Police mobilized immediately. Helicopters scanned lochs and glens. Mountain rescue volunteers combed trails. Dogs were brought to pick up scent from a jacket left in the MacLeod's home. For 2 weeks, the search radiated outward from Loch Glass. Searchers found footprints near a ridge too eroded to confirm. A campsite fire ring, but not theirs. Every day brought a fresh lead, each collapsing under scrutiny. The car, too, was missing. Not on any roadside. Not abandoned in a lay-by. Not towed, stolen, or spotted leaving the region. The McLeods had vanished into the Highlands. To the public, the McLeods became faces on missing posters, smiling, unaware of their tragic fate. But for those close to them, every object left behind in their house cut like glass. Anna's bookmark frozen halfway through Wuthering Heights. Ewan's half-finished rock collection, each stone labeled in messy handwriting. Isla's childlike scrawl on the fridge, "Mummy, can we camp near?" The stars? The silence in their home became unbearable for relatives. Their absence was too loud. Within a month, the case gripped Scotland. Headlines called it the Highland vanishing. Some speculated they had emigrated secretly. Others whispered of foul play, of an ambush along some isolated track. A controversial theory suggested David, under financial strain, had orchestrated a disappearance. Yet no evidence supported it, no large withdrawals, no debts, no signs of planning. His colleagues dismissed it outright. David was too rooted. He wouldn't abandon his children's futures. Still, the media thrives on suspicion. July 14th, a farmer near Strathry reported hearing distant shouting in the hills. Searchers found nothing. July 17th, a hiker claimed to see a blue Ford Estate partially hidden near a forestry track. By the time police searched, no vehicle remained. August 2nd, a fisherman on Loch Glass insisted he saw a tent across the waterline. When investigators reached the spot, the ground was barren, every lead unraveled. And with each unraveling, the family seemed to drift further from reality, becoming ghosts haunting the bogs and ridges. By autumn, the search had scaled down. Volunteers exhausted, police resources redirected. For the McLeod's relatives, this was salt in the wound. Anna's sister recalled driving the A9 compulsively, scanning laybys for their car. David's father began walking alone along trails near Loch Glass, calling his son's name into the wind. Grief curdled into obsession, and obsession into silence. What makes the Scottish Highlands uniquely cruel is their ability to absorb. A person, a family, can step off the path, and the land swallows them whole. Weather erases footprints, bogs entomb without mercy. Water hides. The McLeods had become another secret. And then, as weeks turned to months, and months bled into years, the vigils waned. Posters peeled from lampposts. Journalists moved on. A candlelit gathering in Inverness dwindled from hundreds to a handful. By 2016, the McLeod case was officially cold. But the land does not forget forever. 6 years later, in the spring of 2020, a surveyor contracted to map drainage systems near a peat bog south of Loch Glass was walking his route. His boots struck against something unnatural beneath the waterlogged ground, not wood, not stone, fabric. What he uncovered would drag the case back into the light. A tent, sunken, preserved, and inside, shadows that once were a family. The bog was not meant to be disturbed. Its waters were dark, heavy with centuries of silt and secrets. But on that gray morning in April 2020, a man in a high-visibility jacket and waterproof waders stumbled upon a time capsule of horror. The surveyor, whose name authorities later withheld at his request, had been tasked with inspecting drainage lines near a low-lying stretch of peatland just south of Loch Glass. His notes described the morning as eerily still, like the land was holding its breath. He marked the grid reference, prodded the ground with his staff, and felt resistance, something pliable yet structured beneath the muck. As his hands dug into the peat, he pulled back strands of rotted nylon. At first, he thought it was a discarded tarpaulin. But then his fingers brushed against the taut curvature of a tent pole. Moments later, when he peered into the murky outline, the stench rose, thick, sweet. Decay that had waited 6 years for. Air. Police were called within the hour. Mountain rescue sealed the site. Forensic tents sprouted against the mist. The bog, once unremarkable, became a crime scene. Divers in dry suits waded carefully into the pool, their gloved hands probing. slicing the peat layer by layer. The outline of a small green two-person tent emerged collapsed, warped by pressure, but eerily intact. Inside, the discovery was worse than anyone imagined. There were remains, human, 4 distinct sets, tangled in the fabric, sunken together. Like drowned mannequins, skeletal in parts, yet astonishingly preserved in others. The bog, acidic and low in oxygen, had slowed decay. Soft tissue clung where it should have long vanished. Clothing fibers, colors faded but still identifiable, clung to the frames. Nearby, investigators recovered rusted cooking pots, a collapsed camping stove, and a child's red plastic torch. Its bulb long dead, but casing unmistakable. The bog had become a coffin. A forensic time capsule. The next weeks unfolded like a grim archaeological dig. Each item was logged, photographed, lifted in silence. The forensic pathologist leading the recovery compared it to peeling back layers of a diary written in mud. Key findings: tent brand, Vango Tempest 300. Consistent with receipts found later in the MacLeod's home. Clothing: wool jumpers, waterproof jackets, children's shoes with cartoon motifs. Personal items: a dented thermos flask engraved with the initials M. A laminated map folded neatly, its paper soft but legible. A field journal belonging to Ewan. Pages warped but still inked with faint sketches of rocks and soil layers. Human remains. 4 sets. The bones suggested violent disturbance, not merely the stillness of drowning or collapse. Several fractures, some PERI mortem. It was no longer a mystery of disappearance. It was now a mystery of how they had died inside that bog. News of the tent's recovery spread within hours. By evening, BBC Scotland, STV, and international outlets carried the headline, "MacLeod family found in Highland bog." The story, dormant for 6 years, reignited a storm of speculation. Candlelit vigils returned. Social media filled with grainy photographs of the family smiling on summer days, now framed against captions of loss and horror. For those who had kept their memory alive, the discovery was both relief and agony. Closure, but not peace. Anna's sister told reporters, "I thought maybe they'd gone somewhere better. Now I wish I hadn't hoped at all." Detectives returned to the original 2014 timeline with fresh urgency. They mapped the MacLeods' last known movements, cross-referencing them against the bog's location. The site lay 5 miles south of Loch Glass, off any marked trail. To reach it, one had to cross uneven ground, treacherous, waterlogged, avoided even by seasoned hikers. Question was immediate. Why would a family with children pitch camp in such a dangerous, inhospitable spot? Some suggested the MacLeods set camp unknowingly atop soft ground. Overnight, the bog shifted, water levels rose, and the tent sank with them inside. But forensic fractures complicated this. Several bones, especially ribs and clavicles, bore marks. Consistent with blunt force trauma, not drowning, the old theory resurfaced. Had David orchestrated an escape that went fatally wrong? Investigators dismissed it again. The site showed no signs of preparation for long-term survival, no excess supplies, no deliberate concealment. With evidence of trauma, detectives leaned toward human intervention. The bog, they posited, might not have been chosen by accident, but by intent. The remains were transported to the mortuary in Aberdeen, where forensic teams worked meticulously. David MacLeod, skull fracture, likely caused by a heavy blunt object. Anna MacLeod, multiple broken ribs, consistent with repeated blows. Ewan, 12, fracture to the forearm. Defensive in nature. Isla, 9, no clear trauma, though soft tissue preservation suggested possible asphyxiation. Toxicology yielded little decomposition, had stripped most chemical traces. Still, the patterns pointed unmistakably toward violence. The bog had not claimed them. Something or someone had. Investigators expanded their search radius. Metal detectors swept the peat. Drone imaging mapped depressions in the terrain. 3 days into the secondary sweep, they found something chilling less than 20 meters from the tent, a length of rusted chain, coiled beneath moss. On it, strands of nylon rope, frayed but still knotted. Theories multiplied. Had the family been restrained? Had someone forced them into the tent before weighting it down in the bog? Local folklore crept into the narrative too. Residents of nearby hamlets whispered of the Duv Wisht, the dark water, a patch of bog avoided for generations. Farmers said cattle that wandered too close vanished overnight. Searchers dismissed such tales, but they could not deny the land had always carried warnings. Detectives revisited witnesses from 2014. The petrol station attendant remembered David and Anna in good spirits the night they filled up. A hiker north of the bog recalled hearing a car door slam late at night, followed by voices, raised, tense, but too distant to decipher. A farmer's wife swore she saw headlights weaving erratically down a forestry track that same night. At the time, these accounts were dismissed as unreliable. Now, they painted a possible sequence. The family may have encountered someone out there. One gaping hole remained: the McLeod's blue Ford estate. Even after the rediscovery, the car had never been found. Its absence loomed like an unanswered question, suggesting deliberate concealment. Vehicles rarely vanish without trace. Speculation turned toward nearby locks, their black waters deep enough to swallow cars whole. Divers were dispatched, sonar deployed. Each search returned nothing but mud and silence. The missing car became as haunting as the tent itself. By summer 2020, what had once been a mystery of wilderness became a murder inquiry. Police Scotland's major investigations team took command, treating the bog not as an accident site, but as a grave. And the more they dug into the evidence, the more the shadows lengthened over the Highlands. Who had been out there that July night? Who had forced a family of 4 into a bog and left them buried under peat for 6 years? In August 2020, during a second sweep of the bog perimeter, a forensic officer's gloved hand scraped something metallic from the soil. It wasn't a camping tool. It wasn't debris. It was a weapon, a rusted hammer, its wooden handle warped, but its head still heavy. And on it microscopic traces of blood, locked in the bog's grip since 2014. The question was no longer if the McLeods had been murdered. It was who had wielded that hammer in the dark. The hammer shifted everything. For years, the disappearance of the McLeods was spoken of in tones reserved for the unknowable, a family swallowed by the Highlands, victims of misfortune. But once that rusted hammer was lifted from the bog, still bearing microscopic traces of human blood, the case transformed from tragedy to homicide. The question now was simple, brutal. Who had been out there in July of 2014, and why did they want a family dead? The hammer was transferred to the Scottish Police Authority's forensic lab in Dundee. Specialists used X-ray fluorescence to analyze the degraded surface. The bog had preserved trace elements, fragments of enamel, bone dust, and human blood. Proteins. Tests confirmed a chilling match. The fragments belonged to David McLeod. It was not an accident. It was not nature. It was an act of violence. Yet the weapon raised more questions than it answered. Why a hammer? Why strike, then conceal them in a bog rather than scatter them in the wilderness? And where was the car, the one object large enough to connect a killer to the family? Detectives turned to the human landscape of the Highlands. Remote as it was, the area around Loch Glass was not empty. Small hamlets, crofts, and forestry cabins dotted the map. In 2014, at least 25 permanent residents lived within a 5-mile radius of the bog. Investigators drew up a suspect list, revisiting those interviewed 6 years before. Hamish Fraser, a retired gamekeeper who lived alone in a stone bothy on the edge of the forest. Known for his temper, he had once been fined for threatening hikers who strayed across his land. Colin Murray, a forestry contractor, He often used the rough track leading near the bog for logging equipment. His alibi from 2014 was vague, claiming he had been working nights. The McAndrews brothers, sheep farmers in Strathry, infamous locally for feuds over land boundaries. Both had prior arrests for assault after drunken brawls in Tain. Each man denied involvement then and now. But the atmosphere around their interviews in 2020 was different. This was no longer about a disappearance. This was about a hammer with blood on it. In small Highland communities, silence speaks louder than words. Reporters canvassing the area found locals wary, evasive. Some hinted that the MacLeods had strayed where they shouldn't. Others muttered about arguments over land use trespass, fishing rights, hunting boundaries. One elderly crofter, speaking anonymously, told a journalist, folk knew that bog was avoided. It wasn't safe ground, but someone wanted them there, wanted them buried. The implication was dark. This was not random violence, but a deliberate act of concealment by someone who understood the land. In September 2020, police widened their searches for the MacLeods' Ford estate. Sonar scans swept across Loch Morrie, a deep glacial lake 3 miles from the bog. Divers descended into black water, beams of light swallowed within feet. On the third day, they struck metal. A vehicle sat upright on the loch bed, silted over but intact. When lifted by crane, water poured from shattered windows, fish writhing out. The registration plate was corroded, but enough remained to confirm. The MacLeod's car. Inside were remnants of clothing, wrappers, a child's car seat. No human remains, but in the boot, police found something startling. A second hammer, cleaner, less corroded. This one bore fingerprints, smeared but recoverable, preserved by the anaerobic water. The prints did not match any of the MacLeods. For the family's surviving relatives, the discoveries reopened wounds. David's father, now frail, wept publicly at the news of the car. I imagined him driving back down the A9, bringing them home. Now I see he never had the chance. Anna's sister grew bitter with each revelation. She told reporters, someone out there knows. They've known for 6 years. And they've lived free while my family lay in the ground. The weight of the bog was not only physical, it was psychological. By October 2020, forensics had pulled prints from the second hammer. They belonged to Colin Murray, the forestry contractor. Murray was brought in for questioning. He admitted he had once owned similar tools, but denied ever seeing the MacLeods. He insisted the car must have been planted to frame him. His solicitor accused police of desperate scapegoating. Still, inconsistencies gnawed at his story. Phone mast records from July 2014 placed his mobile near Loch Glass the same night the MacLeods vanished, contradicting his claim of working nights further south. Detectives pressed harder, but Murray held firm. The investigation pressed deeper into the bog itself. In November 2020, forensic teams extended excavation beyond the original tent site. What they found widened the darkness. Less than 30 yards from where the tent lay, buried in peat, investigators uncovered a child's backpack. Inside, waterlogged, notebooks, a pencil case, and a stone, labeled in messy handwriting, quartzite -2014. It was Ewan's geology collection. But the pack also contained something else, a torn strip of fabric not belonging to the MacLeods. Darker, heavier weave. Forensics later identified it as part of a forestry contractor's jacket. The evidence leaned increasingly toward Murray, but detectives knew suspicion was not conviction. To build a case that could stand trial, they needed clarity, motive, sequence, and proof beyond fragments. Theories swirled. Had the MacLeods accidentally crossed paths with Murray while he worked illegally at night, cutting timber without permit? Had there been a confrontation that escalated into violence? Or was there something darker, an obsession, a fixation, that turned to slaughter? The bog held hints but no answers. Winter closed in, casting the Highlands in perpetual gloom. Snow dusted the ridges, mist hung over locks. Investigators trudged daily into the bog, their breath visible in clouds, their equipment frosting. The silence of the land pressed upon them, an oppressive reminder of how easily it had hidden a family for 6 years. But the land had not finished giving up its secrets. On December 3, 2020, during one final excavation before winter shut down, operations, a forensic officer uncovered something lodged deep beneath layers of peat, a journal. Its cover warped, spine-rotted, but its pages astonishingly intact in the anaerobic muck. It was Anna McLeod's diary, and the last entry, dated July 11, 2014, ended with a sentence that froze investigators where they stood. "There is a man watching our camp." The diary entry hit like a thunderclap. There is a man watching our camp. 6 words. 6 words written by Anna McLeod in fading ink, the final testament of a woman who sensed danger in the last hours of her life. For detectives, it was no longer just theory. The McLeods had not stumbled into misfortune. They had been watched, hunted. Forensic analysts treated the diary with reverence. Each page was carefully separated, freeze-dried, and digitally scanned. The last entries painted a picture of an ordinary family slipping unknowingly toward horror. July 10, 2014. David. In high spirits. Ewan insists on bringing too many rocks. Isla singing constantly. July 11, 2014. Morning. Beautiful weather. David says it feels like the Highlands are ours alone. July 11, 2014. Evening. Camp south of the lock. The ground is soft, but David says it will hold. Saw lights in distance near tree line. Thought maybe forestry work. Strange at this hour. July 11, 2014. Night. There is a man watching our camp. The handwriting trailed off mid-sentence, as if written quickly. In fear, the diary shattered what little defense Colin Murray clung to. He was a forestry contractor, his jacket fabric. Found in the bog, his prints on the hammer in the car, his phone mast records placing him at Loch Glass the night the McLeods vanished. When confronted with the diary in January 2021, Murray broke into visible panic. Interrogation transcripts describe him sweating, muttering, pausing for long stretches. Finally, after 15 hours in custody, he confessed, not fully, not cleanly, but enough. He admitted encountering the McLeods while patrolling the forest tracks that night. He claimed they had pitched camp on sensitive ground where his equipment was stored. He said David confronted him, voices were raised. A fight erupted. He described swinging the hammer in panic, but panic did not explain 4 bodies in a bog. Through painstaking reconstruction, detectives pieced together the likely sequence. Approach. Murray spotted the tent near the bog as he drove his truck along the forestry track. He resented campers, especially families, intruding near his operations. His history showed a pattern of aggression toward trespassers. Confrontation. Murray approached the camp. Words escalated. David likely tried to assert his right to camp on open land. Anna, sensing tension, recorded the moment in her diary. Violence. Murray struck David first with the hammer. When Anna screamed, he turned the blows on her. The children, terrified, trapped, were silenced next. Concealment. Murray dragged their bodies, still entangled in the tent, into the bog. He weighted the structure with chain and rope from his truck. He drove the family's car to Loch Morrie and rolled it into the water. Deliberate. Methodical. A slaughter disguised as disappearance. In September 2021, Colin Murray stood trial at Inverness Sheriff Court. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, grieving relatives, locals who had whispered rumors for years. Prosecution laid out the chain of evidence. The hammer with David's blood, the second hammer with Murray's fingerprints, the fabric scrap from his jacket, inside Ewan's backpack, mobile records placing him at the scene. And finally, Anna's diary. The defense argued diminished responsibility. painting Murray as a lonely man, paranoid about losing his livelihood, provoked by the MacLeod's refusal to leave. But jurors saw through it. After 3 weeks, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty of 4 counts of murder, Murray was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum of 32 years before parole. The MacLeod's bodies, preserved by the bogs, Grip, were finally laid to rest in Inverness. Hundreds attended the funeral. Teachers, colleagues, neighbors, strangers who had followed the case for years. 4 white coffins carried side by side. At the service, Anna's sister read aloud from her diary an earlier, innocent entry about Ewan collecting stones by a stream. Her voice broke as she said, "This is how we'll remember them. Not in a bog, not under the shadow of a man's cruelty, but laughing by a stream." What makes this case so haunting is not only the brutality, but the banality of the killer. Colin Murray was no mastermind, no notorious serial predator. He was a contractor, a man whose resentment curdled into violence, whose isolation festered into rage. He killed not for money, not for lust, but for petty control over land, over silence, over the intrusion of a family simply camping under the stars. It is a reminder that in the vastness of the Highlands, the greatest danger was not the land itself, but the human capacity for cruelty. The bog kept its secret for 6 years. It preserved flesh, fabric, diary entries, fingerprints, time itself suspended beneath black water. Without it, the truth might have remained hidden forever, swallowed into folklore as another Highland vanishing. Instead, it became a silent witness, a grave that refused to keep its secret. Imagine walking there now. The bog drained, grass whispering. In the wind, forensic stakes still marking the perimeter. You hear only silence, the same silence the MacLeods must have heard. Seconds before Anna wrote her final words, the Highlands remain unchanged. Hills roll, mist drifts, locks gleam black in the dusk. But for those who know the story, the landscape feels different, haunted, not by legend, but by truth. A family of 4, ordinary, loving, curious, went north for adventure. They found cruelty instead, and though their killer now sits behind stone walls, the horror lingers, that such fragility can be crushed in an instant, that innocence can be buried under peat, and that even the quietest places can harbor violence. The MacLeods are gone, but their story endures, a chilling testament to how the land remembers, even when people forget.